Good stuff. Okay, hello, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for tonight's Cooperation Live event on animal welfare. My name's Emma Foodie. I'm Assistant General Secretary for Membership and Organisation for the Co-op Party. And as I said, today we're going to discuss how a future Labour and cooperative government can promote the rights and welfare of animals. And I'm really pleased that we've got some fantastic speakers joining us this evening to talk about the work that they've been doing in this area, and also to take questions and to hear from participants about their ideas in this area as well. But before I introduce them, we'll just start with a few tips on how we can make the event as interactive as we possibly can. So firstly, for those of you who are hard of hearing, we do work with closed captioners to make sure that the event is live captioned. So if you want to view those captions to enable them for yourself on whatever device you're using to access the event, if you press the CC icon on the bottom tools panel of your phone or your computer, and that should be able to enable them, so you'll be able to see those captions. The Zoom call is also recorded. As we know, a lot of our members can't necessarily access our events live, so we do make them available on the Co-op Party's YouTube channel, so that if you aren't able to access it on the evening, people are able to access it subsequently. In addition to that, just to say that if you don't want your image to be seen for that reason, you can of course remove yourself from audio, remove yourself from video and go audio only if you're not comfortable with your image being used on that. In addition, to prevent any disruption and to ensure the smooth running of the call, only those who are speaking will have sound enabled. So if we do go to questions and things like that, one of my colleagues will be able to unmute you so that you're able to ask your question before popping you back on mute, so that there isn't any kind of background noise to interrupt the evening's events either. After we've heard from our speakers this evening, as I said, we will hold a question and answer session, and there are two ways in which you can ask your question to participate. You can either post a question or a comment in the chat box, which will get moderated and picked up, or alternatively, you can raise your virtual hand via Zoom, and when it's your turn to speak, as I said, we'll unmute you so you're able to contribute. And finally, as with all of our events, please bear in mind that, of course, cooperative values and principles should be at the forefront of all of our activity and actions, and that includes our events. We want to make them and to make sure all of our members feel as safe and welcome and respected as we possibly can. So just on to our speakers. We have had a little bit of a rejig of the lineup to what we perhaps advertised in advance, but we've still got some fantastic contributors who are able to be with us this evening. We've got Richard Bissett joining us, who's Campaigns Manager at Respect for Animals, and we've got Mark Glover, who's Chair for Labour Animal Welfare Society. Now, you may well have seen them. They have been fantastic supporters of the Cooperative Party over a really long period. They will often come to our events, they will often come to our activities, they will often be seen at the forefront of our campaigns. So it's really good to be able to hear from them this evening. So first of all, I think we're going to hear from Richard. So I will hand over to him. Richard, over to you.
Excellent, thanks so much. Is it possible to share a screen with some things and so on?
Yeah, I think Dan will be able to help you with that.
Yeah, excellent. I'll just wait for that to be.
I think you should be able to now.
I can. Brilliant. Right. So yeah, I've just my name's Richard Bissett, and I'm here thanks to, as Emma mentioned, a late change to the starting lineup, as Nikki, a Labour and cooperative councillor, has to attend an important meeting right now, as a fate I'm sure many of you will sympathise with. So I work for Respect for Animals, and I campaign day in, day out against the cruel and unnecessary fur trade. And I'm also part of the Labour Animal Welfare Society. So I do work on wider animal welfare policy also within the Labour movement. And Mark, incidentally, is also both of these things as well, and we're both in the same building at different levels. I also worked for the Labour Party for a little while as a local organiser, so it's great to be here. And I know from all of that work that I've done in the past, I know all too well the importance of the Cooperative Party to the wider Labour movement, and I greatly appreciate the contributions that the Cooperative Party makes to ensuring real societal change at every level of the political process, from the grassroots upwards. The cooperative movement is an indispensable part of the labour tradition, and concern for animal welfare is as well. So it's good to have the opportunity to discuss this issue with you here today, and it's by drawing on all parts of our proud tradition that Labour wins elections and can affect real change. So I'm just going to talk mostly about the issue of fur in particular, and then we'll look at several other important areas of animal welfare policy, and Mark in particular after me will expand on that in more detail. Fur is something of a case study, if you like. It's an indicator of how seriously a government takes animal welfare. It's something of an outlier in terms of the suffering that it inflicts on animals, which are either cruelly trapped or factory farmed in tiny wire cages. And it's also a great case to look at, I think, because it simultaneously is an urgent animal welfare cause. Also, it's an example of conservative broken promises, and it's also a symbol of what a Labour and cooperative government has achieved in the past and what it can achieve in the future. So of the work that we do, for example, we just thought I'd include this, we run the Fur-Free Retailer Scheme, which is an international program going all around the world. And as you can see, one of our members, one of our longest standing fur-free retailers, no less, since 2011, I believe, which is one of the earliest, is a certain consumer affiliate to the cooperative party, the Co-operative Group, which is standing there alongside the likes of Prada, Gucci, Armani, Dolce & Gabbana, and all of these ones. So the cooperative group's there in good company. So what about the fur industry generally? Well, I'll just explain a little bit about the setting and why this is an example of an urgent animal welfare case. The methods of production are banned in the UK, leg hold traps, that is, and fur farming. However, it's still imported and sold in this country. And it's hypocritical, basically, to allow the import and sale of real fur, given that the methods of production are banned here for their cruelty and explicitly on the grounds of public morality as well. Animals suffer incredibly in fur farms. They are the types of animals they are. It's predominantly mink, red foxes, Arctic foxes, and an animal called the raccoon dog. And they're kept in tiny wire cages, all of them. And these are carnivores who are used to their natural impulses of spreading long distances and have particular welfare needs. In the case of mink, they need access to water. So you can imagine cage environments, which are pretty bad for animal welfare at the best of times, are made even worse in terms of the physical and psychological damage that occurs to animals on fur farms. So it's a disaster for animal welfare. It's also bad for the environment because of the impact of pollution and toxic metals and biodiversity threats. And also, you may well have noticed the impact of on public health, because COVID ripped through mink fur farms across much of Europe and caused a real threat to the efficacy of the vaccines for human people. Because once it starts jumping between species, then that's seriously bad news. And also bad news, avian flu has now become established in some parts of mink farms in Spain, which again is not good when it starts skipping between species. So that's a risk for public health as well. And fur sales bans are happening all around the world. Loads happening in the United States. California has banned fur sales now since January across the whole state. There's lots of other bans going through the legislative process right now. Israel has banned fur sales, and the Fur-Free Europe campaign is currently taking place across the European Union, because the European Commission is considering it's looking to update its animal welfare legislation and is seriously considering a fur farming ban and a fur sales ban of fur farmed products across the whole of the single market. Once upon a time, Britain was the leader in animal welfare. Now Britain risks being left behind. So what about Labour's legacy on fur? Well, the UK was actually the very first country to ban fur farming. which Mark is the person who led that campaign and deserves all the credit for that. This was over 20 years ago, and it happened under the last Labour and cooperative government. And it has to be said that this landmark animal welfare legislation was admired, and it's been replicated all across Europe and beyond. It's an example of being the first to take steps for animal welfare policies that then get replicated all around the world. And that is what you call global leadership. And also Labour and cooperative MEPs helped to pass the EU legislation that ended the trade in seal hunt products and cat and dog fur. Seal fur was a big thing, which is driven mostly by the Canadian seal hunt, which is going on at this time of year, still goes on. But I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands fewer baby seals are killed now because of that legislation. And that in particular picture, I believe, was taken by Mark during one of the many times he's been over documenting that shocking act of animal cruelty, which is the Canadian seal hunt. And also then in 2019, the policy, the platform for Labour going into the election, we had an animal welfare manifesto under the leadership of Sue Heyman, who was the Shadow Environment Secretary at the time. And it contained the explicit phrase, I mean, sometimes in the sort of Labour movement, I know sure it's possibly the same with the cooperative movement. We can take a long time to say very simple things, but it just says ban all fur imports, which is very much to the point and a clear pledge. So what about the legacy of the Tory government on this issue? Well, the Conservative government claimed and made a big song and dance and took quite a bit of credit for saying it was going to do things which it then didn't do. It claimed that a fur ban would be part of its Animals Abroad bill, which has since been ditched. DEFRA held a big and I assume rather expensive call for evidence on the fur market in Britain, which took place a couple of years ago now. Lots of people submitted their evidence and thoughts on this about why fur should be banned in Britain, including ourselves. We're still waiting for a response, which is pretty shocking, I think, under the leadership of multiple environment secretaries now. And the latest one last month kicked the fur ban into the long grass yet again, along with the foie gras one as well. So that's the state of play of the Conservative government, which is basically not backed up its promises. That won't come as a huge surprise to you, and it certainly didn't to us because we didn't expect it, to be honest. And that image, as you can see there, you may have seen this in the media, is the type of fur that's still legally imported into this country. This is from Finland, so that's a fox, and it's deliberately bred in that way, kept in a tiny wire cage. It's clearly obese. It's to maximize the pelt and the money from the pelt that is gained from the fur farmers and for the fur industry. Clear animal cruelty, legally imported. So what about public opinion then? Opinion polls consistently show that around 75% of people support a fur ban, which is really strong. And last year, a really interesting seat-by-seat MRP analysis was conducted on animal welfare issues. I know MPs always start to take notice of things when it's done at their own constituency level, so that's been really, really useful, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and about how the strength of public opinion is something to be really tapped into when it comes to animal welfare issues. I've just made the point that constituencies in the so-called Red Wall showed real strong support for animal protection legislation, so that's seats to win back, with around 70% of voters supporting import bans on low welfare products such as fur. And one of the good things about working in animal welfare and doing things like this is you get to put pictures of cute animals up, so you've got to have that to your disposal, and chinchillas never fail to live up to their reputation there. Nor do baby foxes either. So you've got to make the most of what you have at your disposal. Now, what is the way forward, and what could the cooperative party sort of look to do in the future to help? Well, public support from Labour and cooperative candidates for an import sales ban would be really helpful, to keep it on the political agenda, to keep the pressure up, because what we're really keen to have is it as an adopted policy for the next Labour and cooperative government. It was in previous manifestos when we banned fur farming under Labour. The next stage, in order to continue to be a leader in animal welfare, is the fur sales and imports ban as well. But this just isn't about fur, and we're not just going to talk about fur today. The Labour Animal Welfare Society is calling for strong animal welfare manifesto at the next election, and there's a lot of work going on to do that, to try and persuade the party to ensure that that remains the case. And it's interesting little statistic also, almost 3/4 of voters in 20 of the Conservative seats identified as the most marginal want to see the government pass more laws to protect animal welfare. So it makes absolute sense for us to embrace that as part of that arsenal to go on to win the next election. So Mark will expand further on this, but this isn't just, I mentioned about how there was a really strong animal welfare manifesto at the last election in 2019. This is why it should definitely be part of a winning strategy, because this is from 1997, the New Life for Animals document, and it was published with the explicit backing of the leader of the Labour Party at the time, and it was widely distributed. Voters were aware of it. It was popular with voters, and all of these Parliament policy pledges included in this document were then implemented. So it's a great example of what can be achieved in the past and going forward. So I think good animal welfare policies overlap with many areas. It's not just narrow care for animals alone. This can be in several different aspects. For example, whether it's, I mentioned about protecting public health. It's not just about fur. It's, terrible conditions that animals are kept in means that diseases spread and could be a real threat to human health as well. There's also the problem of bad trade deals, which undermine animal welfare and affect our rural communities negatively. And there's also people who are fleeing domestic violence situations who are worrying about the care of their beloved pets as well, which is something that can occur. So it's clear that there's a strong animal welfare platform. It's good for animals and it's good for society as well. And here are just some policy suggestions. I've just put this up because Mark is going to talk through some of these, the type of ones that maybe you'd be interested in, and get on board and help support us for the work that we've been doing as part of the Labour Animal Welfare Society. And I'll just finish surely and just say that animal welfare is a very proud part of the Labour and cooperative movement. And it's by working together and winning together that Labour can attract voters, and together we can win elections and improve the lives of animals. And I'll leave that there, and maybe Mark, or maybe I'll hand it back to Emma and see whether Mark is ready.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's really interesting, as you say, to kind of hear about the commitments that have been made in the past, as well as those suggestions going forward. And also, having worked with you when you were a local organiser, it's fantastic to see the passion and commitment that that was so obvious at the time brought to this area of the movement as well. So I'll ask Mark to come in now if he's ready to, as you say, take that kind of conversation forward and to look at those suggestions further as to which can be brought in from a policy perspective at the next election, and hopefully under the next Labour and cooperative government. As you say, Mark is a tireless advocate and campaigner in this area, and a little known fact about Mark is that he once won a Pride of Britain award for the work that he's done in this area. It becomes less of a secret when I keep telling everyone, but I like to make sure to get it out there. But Mark, if you want to speak now.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. And thanks so much for the opportunity of coming along and speaking tonight. And thanks everyone for giving up your time to listen in. I think it's quite important because, as Richard has outlined, I think we're missing a trick if we don't have strong animal welfare policies to put to the electorate. And it's, I haven't looked into the history of it precisely, but when you look at the Co-operative Party website, there is no mention of animal welfare on there at all. And that's maybe something we can come on to explore and see maybe if that could be addressed at some point. But look, Laws was set up in 1992 as an organisation by the late great Wally Burley. I can see at least one person on this call who knew Wally very well. And Laws is affiliated to Labour Party. As Richard said, polling evidence overwhelmingly shows that voters support animal welfare policies, and we believe firmly that a bold set of policies would help Labour and Co-operative Party candidates to connect with voters and attract support. These types of policies put clear blue water between us and the Tories, who have scant to little interest in animal welfare. They pay lip service to it, but when push comes to shove, they're not interested. The Tory party is quite clearly the party of fox hunters and game shooters. Only a couple of weeks ago, a shoot was auctioned off at the big annual Tory fundraiser, a shoot for a party of, I think, 8, and it sold at auction for £40,000. So this is where they are. And of course, the Countryside Alliance is trying to exert pressure on parties over rural votes. But the fact is, people in rural communities, as the polling demonstrates, support strong animal welfare policies as well as much as those of us who live in more urban areas. And many, if not all of those engaged in hunting or shooting will simply never vote Labour cooperative, and they shouldn't be pandered to when it comes to policy determination. As Richard said, 7 out of 10 voters throughout the UK, including in all target constituencies, would like to see a government that would introduce more animal welfare policies, and a set of bold policies, manifesto commitments, would 100% be attractive to voters, as well as encouraging potential Labour cooperative members to vote. Laws has put all this evidence together in a comprehensive report called Winning Together, which is available on our website. Whereas the Conservative government has abandoned promises on animal welfare and can simply not be trusted to improve the lives of animals. The Conservatives also betrayed rural communities by signing up to post-Brexit trade deals that have a negative impact on British farming and simultaneously undermine animal welfare. And this is a huge opportunity for Labour and cooperative parties to re-establish contact with the farming and rural communities through making commitments on trade. The record of Tories on animal welfare is a legacy of broken promises, as we've said, and failure to act. For them, it's absolutely an electoral liability and could be exploited by Labour and cooperative candidates if, and it's a big if given the ammunition in the form of a bold animal welfare manifesto. But elsewhere, if you look around, in the meantime, the Welsh government has now banned the use of all snares, and the Scottish government has also agreed to the same. And in addition, is now banned trail hunting, which Richard alluded to, as has the National Trust. And trail hunting it's just a blatant loophole that hunts up and down the country routinely use as they continue to fox hunt. really undermining Labour's great animal welfare achievement of banning fox hunting. Hunts are going on all the time. They're going on now. If you go to the Hunt Saboteurs website, which I would recommend, they report on hunt activity happening constantly, undermining Labour's ban. Across the wider electorate, the British public cares deeply about animal welfare. A clear majority supports tightening up of the fox hunting ban and also supports bans on shooting birds for sport. I'm not going to go into huge detail on that, but there's a fantastic report on the law's website about shooting. It is quite extraordinary that every year some 40 million birds, non-native birds, pheasants and partridges, are released into the British countryside just to be shot. Thousands of tons of lead are used to shoot these birds, and it has a massive impact on the environment as well as being extremely cruel. So Laws is asking the parties to bring in those commitments and those manifestos, like the one that Richard illustrated in 1997. It was a fantastic document and had massive public support. And all of the pledges in that were subsequently implemented by the Labour government, including banning fur farming and banning hunting with hounds, but as obviously there's a major loophole in that. Polling evidence is clear. Animal welfare policies are popular, and at a practical level, and this is obviously really important with the way policies are being evolved, they often cost nothing. And in fact, one of the policies we will suggest will raise money as well. We're really hoping that Labour and cooperative parties will consider adopting these policies that reflect and embody the public's wishes for animals and gain better protections and lives here in the UK. We accept that as the general election approaches, there will be many suggestions and ideas for a manifesto, but we believe that we're being entirely realistic in what we would like to see. And it's also worth mentioning the combined membership of animal welfare organisations such as the RSPCA, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, PETA, are millions and millions of people out there support these organisations and are a potential for targeting in social media campaigns by Labour and cooperative parties to garner support. So we're working on currently on a 10-point plan that we will want to put to the Labour Party and indeed to the Cooperative Party. And we believe these are attractive, and as I say, one of them even raises money. I'll quickly run through them. Richard put some of them up on the screen, but we'd like to see the ban on the import of fur and foie gras. More than 70% of people in this country support that. The UK does not produce fur or foie gras because of their cruelty, and it's absolutely hypocritical to allow the continued sale of those products that are banned here because of the cruelty involved. In fact, 81% of people in this country would like a ban on foie gras. The Conservatives included these bans in the Animals Abroad bill, which is currently languishing in the long grass. And one of the reasons is that Jacob Rees-Mogg described these bans as unconservative. And I think that says so much about as I said, the clear blue water between the two parties. I think we need to close the loophole, pun not intended, on snares. Labour Welsh Government has just banned the use of free running snares. Self-locking snares are already banned throughout the UK. Scotland's also now banned all snares, and it would be inconsistent for England not to introduce those same bans. Snares, as many of you will realise, are incredibly cruel, leaving animals to suffer for hours and hours on end. And they're also indiscriminate. Snares catch, the majority of animals caught in snares are not the species they've been set for. Trail hunting should be banned. As I mentioned, Scotland's just done that. The National Trust banned it, but it provides a huge loophole for hunts to continue. Going back to Dear Jacob, Jacob Rees-Mogg's links to the Mendip farmers hunt are well known and well documented. His wife was a former master of the hunt, and their children regularly ride out with the hunt. In January 2023, that same hunt met in a field owned by a Rees-Mogg, and he's previously hosted them at his mansion and attended their hunt balls. We need to work with farmers to properly tackle TB. TB is a shocking disease that affects cows and farmers' livelihoods. The badger cull is clearly not working, and Labour produced a manifesto pledge in 2015 to get rid of it, and we would love to see that pledge repeated. And again, it's a good way of connecting with rural communities, because the culling of badgers is simply ineffective, cruel, and wasteful. We'd also like to see an action plan for the transition to animal-free testing and research. Similarly, animal testing is proving to be ineffective, it's very expensive, and 75% of people in the UK believe that more work needs to be done on alternatives into using animals in research. Animal models now compared to artificial intelligence and computer models have huge limitations, and there's been encouraging progress to developing much more humane alternatives to many animal experiments. So we'd really like to see an action plan to seriously commit to look towards transitioning away from animal experiments. Guns have been in the news recently. In fact, you may have seen a terrible report on BBC Breakfast this morning about someone who should not really have had a license, but he did, who shot his wife and 2 children and then himself. And that follows on from the appalling incident in 2021 down in Plymouth. The bottom line of this is that a gun license costs £79.50 and a shotgun certificate costs £88. And yet it costs, if done properly, £520 to administer and issue that license. It is completely bonkers that we as taxpayers are subsidizing people to get guns. And without that increase in funding, the due diligence that's required by the police and the authorities simply is not there. So we would ask that the whole gun licensing regime is looked at and the proper fee for a license put in place. I mentioned the whole issue of shooting and the import of pheasants and partridges. The public want to see these imports banned, and of course they've been suspended because of avian flu. But it would be insanity to allow the import of, as I say, tens of millions of these non-native birds that can now clearly be a vector for avian flu, which would impact on, well, has already impacted on our own farming industry. So we would like to see a review of driven grouse shooting, a ban on imports of pheasants and partridges, and a ban on the use of cages for rearing these poor wretched birds which are then thrown out to then be shot. And you may have seen recently a campaign to try and get the opening up of shooting woodcock, which I think is extraordinary. Anyway, it should be banned, but put back to the 1st of December to ensure that our own native endangered woodcock is not killed. Lastly, as also mentioned in brief, we need to have proper trade agreement arrangements which do not impact negatively on our farming communities and on the animal welfare standards that we work to. The trade agreements with New Zealand and Australia have been a complete disaster for animal welfare, and we're all aware of what may happen with the trade agreement with the US and the import of dodgy chicken and hormone-fed beef, etc. We have an opportunity here of not just helping and maintaining farmer standards here, but improving animal welfare abroad. So those are the points that I've used as examples for our 10-point plan. And we're evolving those now, and would very much appreciate input from people with an interest in these areas. But what more can be done by the Cooperative Party and its members? I would ask the party, of which I'm a very proud member, to look at producing its own animal welfare policy and publish it on its website and promote to members. We as Laws have attended Cooperative Party's last annual conference, and the feedback was fantastic from members there. And we bump into each other at Labour Party regional conferences, and we'll be joining the party as an organisation, if we're accepted, the closest that we can come to affiliation to the party. We'd also urge Cooperative Party members to have a look at our Winning Together reports to the Laws website and get involved with the policy manifesto discussions. And lastly, of course, I'm duty bound to say it, Cooperative Party members can join Laws. It's only £6 a year. What more can you want? On that note, look, I've overstayed my time, so thank you so much, and thank you again for inviting us along. And I think, we're available for questions.
Thank you so much, Mark. Really comprehensive, as you say, kind of list of the different things that we're asking for, but also as to ways in which people can get involved and contribute as well. We have got just a little bit of time for questions, and a couple of kind of hands have come up, and there's been questions in the chat as well. So I'll go to them first. I'll do a round of 2 or 3, and then we'll see kind of where we get to if more people come forward then. Roger. Hello, Roger. I haven't seen you in ages.
It's quite a long time, Emma, isn't it? I just wanted to join in just briefly now. Sorry, just jog my memory to listen to Mark on it, given that, taking my mind right back, I was one of the founder members with Wally Burley of the organisation Laws many years ago, and acted as treasurer for well, right up until almost until we lost Wally, which was a really bad, it's a very sad day when Wally died, and unfortunately I haven't been able to be very active with Laws since, although I'm still a member, I think. It's an organisation that I just wanted to back up Mark, that's done a lot of very good work over many years, and I certainly want to recommend to people to join and get their organisation as affiliated, and certainly the co-op. It's certainly something that I mean, I've been involved at a local level with my local authority. I was a councillor for a number of years, and one thing that I did was to get my authority to adopt an animal welfare charter, in which we were able to do quite a number of things, which unfortunately, because of the way the law is now, some of them have been, there's been things that we haven't been able to do, but you know, banning snares on council land and that sort of thing. Sorry, my memory is nothing like what it used to be, but I mean, I really support what's been said, you know, as far as laws is concerned, and I hope everybody will support them.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks for that contribution, and really lovely to see you again. As we say, I haven't seen each other in such a long time. But I think you also really interesting point raised by Roger there as well about, is there action? You know, we've got a lot of co-op councillors. We're going to be standing a lot of candidates in this election as well. And so I think a really interesting question there as to whether there's things which local authorities can potentially do as well in this area, for Mark and Richard to come back on. And then just a couple of questions that have come in the chat as well, which I'll just take. So there's a question from Mike. Mike's asked about kind of as to what would be proposed as to an alternative to the badger cull, and how we kind of break the link of transmission between badgers and cattle with disease there. And then another one that's come in from Dennis, talking on a slightly different aspect of this topic, really, around pets and the kind of vast increases that we've seen of people having domestic pets. And I think that's something that we've especially seen increase over lockdown, and kind of the subsequent kind of lockdowns around the pandemic, and a question kind of off the back of that around, you know, problems which are potentially associated with that, around people not being able to keep those animals now that their circumstances have potentially changed. They're not working from home anymore, or alternatively the cost of living has meant that that's become an additional pressure, and also additional kind of behavioural problems that have potentially been seen with animals as well. So quite a kind of range of questions which we've had there. So I'll come to Mark first in this instance, and then I'll come to Richard to see if there's anything else that you want to add, and then if we've got time we'll take a couple more questions. Mark?
Thanks so much, and thanks for the questions. The badger issue has been addressed in the chat by Judy, and she said pretty much exactly what I was going to say. There are tried and tested methods of using biosecurity and vaccination to control bovine TB in the badger population, and that they've just got to be adopted. The current cull is simply not working, and farmers are losing thousands, tens of thousands of pounds every year in many areas because of it. So that would be the answer to that. Roger, thanks, and thanks for all your many years of help with laws and setting it up. And of course, you're dead right, and you will be aware that laws pioneered almost the whole idea of local authority charters. And we have, dare I say, an oven-ready animal welfare charter that many authorities around the country have adapted to their needs and adopted. And there are tons of things that local authorities can do. Here in Nottingham, the County Council, when it was under Labour control, banned hunting on council lands, which was a major step forward. And many authorities, going back to our Respect for Animals hat, have banned the sale of fur at council-run markets. Those are just two examples of the many things that councils can do. But like I say, and it's on the website, there is a standardized local authority charter, but we'd be very happy to speak to councillors and local authorities about how they can do that. I think those are the points I was going to cover. Oh, pets. The Tories have just fulfilled their manifesto commitment to introduce what do you call it for cats, dogs, microchipping cats, which is obviously a step forward, but it doesn't go anywhere near enough. There's issues like banning keeping of primates and all sorts of things that need to happen on the pets issues. Banning pet markets that are terrible, and hopefully we'll include that in our 10-point plan. So it's work in progress, and we'd be very grateful to hear more details from people if they've got specific requirements. I don't know, Richard, if you want to pick up on anything.
Yeah, no, just very briefly about the local authorities laws. Sorry, my video seemed to be glitching there for a moment. I don't know if that appeared to anyone else. Yeah, laws has in the past produced an animal welfare charter for local authorities, which contains a load of policies and things that could be either ratified in full by a local authority or otherwise. That's something that I think laws is going to be looking to update and produce a real up-to-date one as soon as possible. Yeah, there's lots of policies. One thing that I've worked on is with local authorities is fur again, is banning fur from markets and things on council land and things like that, which is surprising how often cheap fur is sold on markets and things like that. And Mark also mentioned obviously trail hunting ban on council land, which was done by Nottinghamshire County Council. So yeah, there's loads of policies. I think the law animal welfare charter for local authorities is on the law's website, but that's something that, as I say, we will be updating and making as up to date as possible as soon as possible. Yeah, I think just to add to the badger call, it's already been stated, but additional biosecurity measures is something which isn't being done to an extent that it is. And you know, there's a lot of people banging on about this, and it's time to support farmers through DEFRA to incentivize them so that they do take effective biosecurity measures with cattle movement, cleaning of vehicles, how cattle is stored, and slurry movement and things like that. But of course, it's not with the badger cull, it's not just about badgers who are suffering. The cattle are suffering as well. So it's about time we had a joined up and sensible policy for this that was actually sustainable and did something about it in the long term. And also the amount of pets. Yeah, the problem with pets, I think it's clear that action has to be taken to tackle puppy smuggling and things like that. So there's a lot of illegal sales of pets and so on. Things like this are often already illegal. So it's about enforcing the laws that are already taking place and giving resources to the police and so on to ensure that these things can be cracked down on. And also it's about ensuring that people have better accessibility to affordable veterinary care, as mentioned during the cost of living crisis and things like that. And also ensuring that people have rights when it comes to keeping their pets in their if they're tenants or things like that, and also in sheltered accommodation as well, so that they can continue to look after animals. So that's good for the people because they don't want to lose these animals that they love a lot of the time, but it's also good for the animals as well. So it's about dealing with the problems when people struggle to look after them, and it's also dealing with the supply when too many are being it's too easy to supply animals as pets, often from really low quality welfare backgrounds. So there we are. That's all I have to add on that.
Thank you so much, Richard and Mark. We've got just a few more questions, which we'll do as a final round, because we do need to finish promptly for 7. So Tracy in the messages has asked whether there's any Scottish specific asks for MPs, MSPs or for councillors. And then there's just a couple of points raised. So Karina, for example, has said, you know, the need for kind of reform of the law when it comes to reporting cats being involved in accidents in the way that there is for dogs at the moment. Dennis has reiterated the need for good kind of policy ideas around pets. And then a final one from Karina, who's asking for contacts around wildlife crime. If either of you are able to provide anything there. But so yeah, so just if there's any kind of final comments that you want to make on any of those kind of issues or comments that have raised, or anything otherwise. And I'll come to Richard first this time, and then we'll finish with Mark.
Yeah. Oops, wrong one. Yeah, I think these are very important questions. I mean, it's what are the areas? I think there's also one specifically asking about Scotland as well. So I'll maybe I'll try and come back on that a little in a moment, and maybe put that in the chat. Yeah, I think wildlife crime is very important. This is something that, you know, it's another one of those things that is already, we often have strong laws already. Local police don't have the resources, and it's just not considered to be a priority. And it's a really big, important issue because it affects our biodiversity and our wildlife, which is something that we've not really mentioned today, I don't think. But Britain is one of the sort of, it's wildlife poor in terms of the biodiversity and wildlife that we have, and that's a real shame. And illegal activities which affects these, and particularly protected species, is something that just hasn't been tackled and isn't considered to be a priority. And you know, that's not good enough at all. What can you remind me what the other areas were?
Other comments were about was a need for a proper law around reporting cats involved in accidents, yeah. And there was also just a reiteration around the importance for kind of policy detail around pets, given kind of that they are the animals which most people will kind of interact with and will therefore kind of care the most about, arguably. And yeah, those were kind of the comments that have come in.
Yeah, I totally agree about the issue of the proper law when it comes to reporting cats. That's really something important to highlight. That's a policy that we've been working on in the past. It was in the Animal Welfare Manifesto in 2019, and in the most recent Winning Together report, where we looked at the polling as well as also policies and so on, under the section of protect pets from ill treatment. We're still campaigning and focusing on ensuring that expand the reporting of motor accidents to include cats. So it's very much on our agenda, and I totally agree with that as a really important issue to continue to be raising.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. I'm just mindful of time, so I'm just going to go to Mark, just so that he can eke in the last 3 minutes before we have to leave the call. Sorry, okay. Mark.
Well, again, thanks. And I'll just pick up on a couple of those points. There's an additional issue with pets, and that is that quite often pets are a deterrent for women leaving situations where they face domestic violence, and the pet becomes a hostage because there's nowhere they can go and take those pets. And so there are schemes around the country where people provide foster homes for those pets, or to find accommodation that accept pets. And I think it's really important that the government would addresses that on a national level, because there are way too many examples of women not leaving those situations because they can't take their pets with them. I'm afraid, yeah, don't want to give them credit, but the Tories introducing the measure for cats will actually help to report cats if they are run over. But yes, it should be mandatory. There's a real opportunity with wildlife crime, again, for engaging with those rural communities. So many farmers get sick of dogs worrying and even killing sheep. I've seen sheep that have been attacked by dogs, and they all had to be put down. It was a shocking crime. Dogs should be on leads around livestock. And there's a way of engaging with farmers in those communities by having proper wildlife crime units. And again, we've all seen the dreadful episodes of birds of prey being shot on shooting estates because they know they can get away with it. Scotland, well, Scotland's ahead of games right now with ban on trail hunting and snares, but all of the other issues to do with banning fur, etc., apply equally in Scotland. So I'm not quite sure what else I can add on that, but we've got to catch up with Scotland. And I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Mark. And just to say a huge thank you to Richard and Mark for their contributions this evening and the work that they're doing in this area. So thank you for that. Also, just to kind of reiterate some of the points that Mark's made, I know Richard shared some documents in the chat there so that they're available to people, but also some people were asking for those kind of model charters for local authorities and things, and they are all on the law's website, so can be accessed there. I'm sure that this is a conversation that is going to continue, as we say, in earnest as we come towards the next election and where we are in the cycle. But just to say a huge thank you for everyone's contributions tonight, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much. See you later.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.